Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump says India will buy Venezuelan oil as opposed to purchasing oil from Iran. He said, "We've already made that deal and the concept of the deal." Days after threatening tariffs on any country supplying Cuba with oil, Trump says he believed the United States would work a deal on Cuba. Donald Trump has posted on Truth Social that he has ordered the Department of Homeland Security to under no circumstances get involved with protests in democratic-led cities unless they ask for federal help or federal property is threatened. Protests have broken out against US President Trump across the United States, with protesters denouncing Trump and ICE from San Francisco to Minneapolis. Zelensky has said that Ukraine was waiting for more information from the United States about further peace talks and expected new meetings to take place next week. Israel reopens the Rafah border between Gaza and Egypt after nearly 2 years on a trial basis to test security screening as thousands of sick and wounded Palestinians seek urgent medical care abroad. The Iranian Army's commander-in-chief Amir Hatami said that the armed forces were ready to defend the Islamic Republic until the end amid aggressive posturing by the US and allies. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presents a ninth budget on Sunday as markets open. Alright viewers, now let's start with the top focus. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei has issued a stern warning stating that any US attack on Iran would escalate into a regional conflict. According to reports, Khamenei emphasized that if the United States initiates military action against Iran, the consequences would extend beyond bilateral hostilities, involving broader regional instability. The remarks reflect heightened tensions in the ongoing geopolitical struggle between the two nations. Professor Wesleyan Popovsky, professor at the Jindal Global Law School, he's the Vice Dean, joins us now in this discussion from Thailand. Professor, thanks very much. It's good to see you. Clearly, after Trump said that Iran is seriously looking for talks, once again, Iran issuing a statement says US action will escalate and Iran will retaliate. There are clearly very contradictory statements coming in from both the countries. What do you really think is happening?
Yes, you are right. There are contradicting statements. But this happened before, by the way. If we look back last year in September, Iran did retaliate, although in a very weak way, to what Israel and United States at the time strike. It was basically focused on nuclear facilities, what Israeli and with the assistance by United States happened in September. Iranians always use such language. They try to say that this will be a big conflict if you strike us, the whole region will inflame, but these are talks. This never happened, by the way. So even, well, first of all, I don't expect escalation. I don't expect strikes. It's just the two sides are playing kind of each other and also playing their domestic audiences. Trump would like to look strong and somehow to be a global leader who can contain the Iranian regime. And the Ayatollah Khamenei also wants to look stronger and somehow using that language, he wants to reassure the Iranians that he is in charge, but the Iranians have no doubt here that the regime is so weak already. And that's why exactly Ayatollah Khamenei used language somehow to revitalize his leadership, but that's probably a no-go long term. So that's how I will assess this. Different statements from two leaders, but mostly focus on the domestic audiences, both in Iran and in the United States.
Professor, what is going to be the likely next course if, let's say, US does strike Iran? Should we see a shift to democracy? Should we see Khamenei still being there but moderating his policies? Should we see Khamenei going and then military rule taking over? What really is next?
It's a very good question, but I don't think the right way to expect democracies in Iran is by foreign powers. It never worked very well. If we remember Iraq, Afghanistan, and other attempts to impose democracy from outside, it never worked well, by the way. What may happen is that the regime itself will be weakened over time, and not only because possible strikes, but simply because of its totally disastrous economic policy and not any other policy. Iranians get very much impoverished over the last now 20 years and more. So the protests in Iran are against the economic policy of this totally incompetent religious radical regime. And that's what makes people want a change. They don't want to change to follow America or to follow West or to follow Europe or anybody else. They are independent, sovereign people. The Iranian people want change. They want better economic policy. They want elections. They want democracy. They want human rights and what everybody else in the world wants. And this is why somehow paradoxically encourage the Iranian people to continue with the protests, to continue with their demands, and gradually achieve what in similar situations when we get rid of communism in 1989, it was with some encouragement by Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, but the 99% of the work was done by the Polish, Hungarian, Czech, Bulgarians, and others. In a similar way, the change in the Middle East happened also because people wanted. The people of Egypt wanted to get rid of Hosni Mubarak. The people of Libya wanted to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi. It was not the West, it was not United States, it was nobody else. People in Egypt and Libya removed their dictators. People in Eastern Europe removed their dictators. And that's what should happen in Iran. The people of Iran should remove Khamenei.
Right. All right. Indeed, Professor, do stay on with me as we now move on to cover news from Gaza. Preparations are underway now for the partial reopening of Gaza's Rafah crossing with Egypt, a key lifeline for the territory. A Palestinian delegation responsible for managing the crossing, along with dozens of ambulances, entered Gaza from the Egyptian side. Israel says the crossing has been reopened in a limited pilot phase, allowing only the movement of Palestinian residents. The Israeli defense minister says that the opening is being coordinated with Egypt and the European Union Border Assistance Mission. Full package will begin after security preparations are complete. Gaza officials say around 20,000 people are waiting to leave for medical treatment abroad. The crossing has been under Israeli control since May 2024. The reopening follows a ceasefire under a US-backed plan to halt the war. However, the crossing will only allow people to pass, not aid, even as humanitarian groups warn that Gaza remains in desperate need of supplies. All right, I request Professor Popovsky to join me back in the discussion here. Professor, it's crucial to know that Israel is saying it's opening the Rafah crossing on a trial basis as Palestinians are needing urgent medical attention, but Israel really wants to test it, try it out to see if security parameters are assessed. What really happens if a security situation changes, contrary to what Israel is hoping for? Will it then continue to strike Gaza and kill Palestinians?
I think it's a good news that the Rafah crossing is open for the humanitarian reasons. People who are injured or who have been in starvation for many years, more than 2 years, should move to a safer place. And by the way, I will ask why this crossing is closed. It should be open at all times. It's good for the people to cross, to receive some assistance on the other side of the border. Well, we know why, because neither Egypt nor Israel want that. They kind of, interestingly, Egypt is concerned with massive refugee flows. Although, on the other hand, by the way, the Polish border has never been closed with Ukrainian, even if 6 million Ukrainians cross that border. So kind of, on one hand, Israel doesn't allow that because they would like to ensure that Hamas fighters don't escape and they remain in Gaza and be neutralized there. And on another hand, Egypt doesn't want to open the crossing because they don't want to accept a large amount of refugees. But so that's why this is a good news, because at least for a limited time, a limited number of people can receive their humanitarian assistance on the other side of the border. Let's welcome that.
Sure. Professor, now once again, the fact that only medical, people needing medical attention are being allowed to cross, what's the real risk that there is now for Egypt if even more people who are not medical patients also cross over?
Well, again, because there are those limitations you mentioned, I don't expect a large number of refugees to cross. There will be, these are visible issues who is crossing. There will be still some checks of documents. I don't expect any tragedy for Egypt here. Not at all, actually, the opposite. They should have already accepted a large number of people who need medical assistance. By the way, those children who die in Gaza would have been alive if that crossing was open. They could have been in hospitals, they could have been in schools in Egypt. I will ask why Egypt doesn't accept a single Palestinian child in its own schools in Egypt. Why? It's the same language. How can Ukrainians go to Czech Republic, Baltic states, Poland, Romania, where they don't speak the same language? And 6 million refugees went there and into safety, and it was a life-saving operation. And no single Palestinian child was accepted at any Arab country for the last 2.5 years.
Well, Egypt is also on board the Gaza Board of Peace, Professor. Egypt is on board the Gaza Board of Peace that Donald Trump is saying. So why is Trump not really talking to Egypt and facilitating the movement of these Palestinians who require medical help and children?
Excellent question. Absolutely. Why not? Everybody, not only Donald Trump, the world leaders should talk to Egypt, but also to other Arab countries and say, where is your solidarity? How do you help the Palestinians? By crossing the border and they cannot come and receive medical assistance? Good questions to every single Arab government.
Right, Professor.
Like Dubai, like Emirates, like Qatar, they have a lot of money. They could have accepted Palestinian children, put them in schools, and put them in a good condition. Where is the Arab solidarity? I'm asking all the Arab governments to tell me.
Right, Professor. We'll now move on now. Viewers, let's also tell you that Hamas tunnel spanning hundreds of meters in Gaza's southern Khan Yunus was recently demolished by combat engineers. This is what the Israeli military is saying. According to the IDF, the tunnel featured 3 rooms for terror operatives to reside in. Inside, the army says troops found dozens of weapons, including 45 grenades, Kalashnikov rifles, RPGs and launchers, explosive devices and other military equipment. The tunnel was located on the Israeli side of the Gaza ceasefire line during mop-up operations of the 188th Armored Brigade. It was then raised by the elite Yahalom Combat Engineering Unit. Request Professor Popovsky to join me back on this with his first comments.
Yes, please.
Professor, this is of course a welcome news if Israel has been able to demolish these underground tunnels, and it's a step in disarming Hamas. How much of credit do you think we can give to Trump for this development?
Not to Trump at all. Trump doesn't do those things. He's talking and he's claiming some benefit. The Israeli IDF, the Defense Force of Israel, did everything here. They demolished the tunnel. They did all the work. We shouldn't ask about Donald Trump every time when somebody does something.
But won't you say
so,
it was after he initiated and implemented the Board of Peace plan? Hamas has completed, returned the last remaining hostage's body. Now, Israel is also able to dismantle these underground tunnels. Should we give him credit where it's due?
Absolutely not. It's a talk. It's a Board of Peace is absolutely useless organization. It didn't deliver anything. The deal, by the way, you mentioned, is discussed over the last 3 years, much before Donald Trump existed into the picture. It was Qatar and Egypt. Now, let me talk about Egypt and Qatar in a positive manner. They did all the mediation between Hamas and Israel over the last 3 years. Donald Trump didn't exist at the time when Qatar and Egypt invited Hamas and Israeli second-rank mediators first and then moved up to the top. Donald Trump only comes in the last minute and claims everything. It's not Donald Trump. Remember that. It's Egypt and Qatar with their mediators who achieved the ceasefire in Gaza. And let's make this very clear. So all the praise and all the benefits should go to Egypt and Qatari mediators for the achievement of that deal. And obviously that deal includes disarmament of Hamas, which is very courageous to see from Egypt and Qatar to Arab countries supporting Israel to achieve the disarmament of Hamas, meaning the Arab countries are united, willing the end of Hamas as a ruling force in Gaza. And that's also something that needs to be emphasized. So hopefully by those actions you mentioned, the destroyal of the weapons, the tunnels, including possible at some point voluntary disarmament by Hamas, gradually we will reach the conditions for peace in Gaza. Again, the role of United States is very simply talks and claiming some awards, but it was not the United States doing this for the last 3 years.
Right. Well, we'll watch out if by the end of these 3 years Trump gets a Nobel or not. But thanks very much, Professor, for joining me in this discussion. And we move on now, viewers. Now, at least 33 people, including 18 civilians and 15 security personnel, were killed in a series of coordinated attacks across Pakistan's Balochistan province. The Balochistan Liberation Army, an outlawed separatist group, claimed responsibility for the assaults, which targeted police stations and military installations in districts such as Quetta, Gwadar and Noshki. The BLA stated that the attacks involving gunfire and suicide bombings were carried out simultaneously across 9 districts. While the initial attacks were described as poorly executed by Pakistani officials, the violence resulted in significant casualties. Following a 40-hour military response, Pakistan's security forces killed at least 145 militants, as confirmed by the Chief Minister of Balochistan. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi condemned the attacks and praised the security forces for their rapid response. The Pakistani military has alleged that the attacks were orchestrated by Indian-backed militants, a claim India has denied. All right, joining me now in this discussion is Ambassador Suresh Goyal. He's former Indian diplomat and joins us from New Delhi. Ambassador, thanks very much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Firstly, how do you see Pakistan continuously blaming India for its Balochistan problem?
I think that is only to be expected the way the relationship between India and Pakistan is. And Pakistan has been doing it for, I don't know how many decades, how many years, etc., blaming others for all the fault lies in their own polity. So I'm not surprised at all that Pakistan is blaming India, but I really wish and I really do hope that in case, if they're really serious about resolving their internal issues, that they would look at the problems much deeper, with much more care, and try and investigate what actually the real situation on ground is. Otherwise, the same kind of situation will continue. Pakistani government, no, sorry, not Pakistani government, but Pakistani army, which is the actual real government, continuing with its atrocities and killing of the Balochis, and the Baloch in terms of really trying to reclaim their own right to exist in their own land, the way with their traditions, they will continue to basically then inflict damages on the Pakistani army.
Yeah.
So unless they really enter into some kind of a peace process and try and adjust to each other, this will continue.
What do you think has stopped Pakistan from meeting the demands of the Balochistan? What they're asking is only for economic and administrative welfare.
You see, if you look at Pakistan's politics, and I'm not really going into the whole thing as to how Pakistan began. The Pakistani army is basically Punjabi army. Pakistani politics is basically Punjabi politics. Other nationalities like Pakhtuns or Balochis have, or even the people who are living in the Pakistani occupied Jammu and Kashmir, have very little role to play in the governance of the country. And the Pakistani army, Punjabi army basically, continues to dominate all the resources. So every other nationality, whether it is Pakhtuns or Balochistan, particularly those who live in the border areas with Afghanistan, they become targets of Pakistani army's operations and exploitation. So that is what it is.
And how would you merit India's response that has come in? India has, of course, gone on to call Pakistan's claims as completely baseless and asked it to not blame India for its internal problems.
I wouldn't even go that far. I would completely dismiss all these allegations of Pakistan. Pakistani allegations are not even worth listening to or responding. They're totally ridiculous.
All right, then, Ambassador, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for joining us and speaking to us. Moving ahead, viewers, Elon Musk has announced that steps taken by SpaceX to stop Russia's unauthorized use of Starlink seem to have worked. In a post on X, the SpaceX CEO stated, "Looks like the steps we took to stop the unauthorized use of Starlink by Russia have worked. Let us know if more needs to be done." Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov revealed that Ukraine is collaborating with SpaceX to prevent Russia from guiding drones using Starlink, after the system was found on long-range drones used in Russian attacks. Despite Musk's controversial stance on the war, Ukraine still relies on Starlink for battlefield communication and drone operations. Fedorov called for Western technology to support democratic nations and protect civilians rather than aiding terrorism and destruction. Viewers, that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news and updates.